Most men lose a woman's respect in the first 60 seconds, not because they say the wrong thing, but because they reveal one thing they were trained to hide: need. They think questions create connection. They think curiosity signals value. They think filling the silence makes them interesting. It does the opposite. There is a moment early in every interaction when power silently changes hands. You won't feel it, you won't see it. But once it's gone, you will spend the rest of the conversation trying to recover it, and you never will. Tonight, you're going to understand what actually happens in that moment, why the instinct to ask questions weakens your position, why silence unsettles more than words, and why the man who does not seek information controls the frame of the encounter. This is not about seduction. This is about presence. And if you recognize yourself in what comes next, you may realize you've been giving away authority without ever noticing the exchange. You believe you are starting a conversation. What you are actually doing is negotiating your position. The first question you ask is not harmless. It is a signal. It says, "I need direction." It says, "You define the terrain." It says, "I am waiting for you to give me something to work with." And in that instant, the hierarchy is quietly established. You were taught that asking questions shows confidence, that it demonstrates interest, that it makes her feel seen. But look deeper. Strip the politeness away. A question is a request, and every request places you one level beneath the person who can grant it. When you ask, "So what do you do?" you are not gathering information. You are asking for material to survive. You are saying, without realizing it, "Give me something so I don't run out of value." That subtle fear is detectable, not consciously, not logically, but instinctively. Human beings are exquisitely sensitive to need, especially in early interaction. Need shifts weight, need bends posture, need speeds up speech, need fills silence too quickly, and silence is where most men collapse. There is a specific moment, you've felt it before, when the conversation pauses. Her last sentence fades, the air thickens, you feel exposed, uncertain. Your mind starts racing for the next line, the next topic, the next safe bridge. That discomfort is not about her. It is about your inability to exist without performance. You were trained to perform, to entertain, to demonstrate value on demand, to avoid dead air at all costs. Because somewhere along the way you internalized a rule: if I stop producing, I stop mattering. So you produce. You ask another question. You expand. You clarify. You over-explain. You surrender frame to avoid feeling invisible. But here is the uncomfortable truth. The man who fears invisibility creates it. Because when you rush to fill space, you announce that you cannot hold it, and the one who cannot hold space cannot command it. Think about authority in any environment. The most dominant presence in the room rarely speaks first, rarely explains themselves, rarely rushes. They observe, they measure, they allow others to reveal themselves in reaction to silence. That silence is not emptiness, it is control. When you ask rapid questions, you move toward her world. When you make calm observations, you invite her into yours. There is a difference. One seeks approval, the other assumes relevance. Machiavelli understood something brutal about human perception. Power is rarely taken by force. It is given away by insecurity. People reveal their rank by how quickly they seek reassurance. Questions, especially early ones, often carry reassurance disguised as curiosity. You want to know if she likes what you like. You want to know if she approves of what you do. You want to know where you stand. But the more you try to define the ground, the more you expose that you do not own it. This is where most men lose respect, not because they are weak, but because they are transparent in their hunger. And hunger is not attractive when it is obvious. There is a paradox here. The less you need to extract from her, the more she begins to reveal voluntarily. The less you chase clarity, the more intrigue builds naturally. But to operate that way, you must survive something most men avoid: being misunderstood. You must be willing to let a moment pass without explanation, to let her wonder what you're thinking, to allow ambiguity to exist without rushing to correct it. That requires internal stability. Because once you stop asking, something strange happens. You are left alone with yourself. No script, no safety net, no external validation feeding the interaction forward. Just you, present, uncovered. And that is where the real threat begins. Not the threat of losing her, the threat of discovering that without constant effort, you don't know who you are in silence. Most men aren't afraid of women. They are afraid of stillness. And until you can sit in that stillness without scrambling for control, every conversation you enter will start from deficit. This chapter is not about tactics. It is about exposure. If you remove the questions, if you remove the performance, if you remove the rush to be liked, what remains? That answer determines everything that follows. And most men are not ready to confront it. What you call being social is often a defense mechanism. Look closely at your own behavior, the quick smile, the immediate question, the reflex to agree, the subtle lean forward when she speaks. You believe you are showing interest. What you are actually showing is calibration. You are adjusting yourself in real time to reduce the risk of rejection. That adjustment is ego defense. Your ego is not protecting pride. It is protecting identity. And your identity, if we strip it down, is fragile in early interactions because it depends on response. If she reacts well, you feel solid. If she hesitates, your structure shakes. So you compensate, you ask more questions, you try to understand her better, you search for common ground. You attempt to earn emotional credit before you have established psychological presence. This is not curiosity. It is anxiety management. You think you are trying to connect. In reality, you are trying to stabilize yourself. And that is where the decay begins. Emotional fatigue is the silent cost of this pattern. You leave conversations drained, not because she was demanding, but because you were performing constantly, monitoring her tone, adjusting your delivery, calculating your next move, trying to stay interesting. That level of hyper-awareness erodes masculine stability over time. You start to feel invisible even when you are included. You start to feel replaceable even when she responds. Because deep down, you know she is reacting to the version of you that adapts, not the version that stands. This creates identity fragmentation. Part of you wants to be dominant and grounded. Another part wants approval. One side wants to lead. The other wants to be accepted. These forces pull in opposite directions, and the result is subtle incoherence. She feels it, not intellectually, instinctively. A man divided within himself cannot project direction, and direction is what creates gravity. Instead, you begin to withdraw strategically, not fully, not obviously, but internally. You stop saying what you really think. You avoid tension. You avoid statements that might create disagreement. you soften your edges. This is how men become socially competent but psychologically irrelevant. They are pleasant, safe, easy, forgettable. The deepest fear here is not rejection, it is irrelevance. You fear being the man she forgets 5 minutes after leaving, the one who was nice but left no mark, the one who asked good questions but inspired no curiosity. And here is the brutal observation. The more you try to avoid irrelevance by extracting information, the more predictable you become. Predictability kills tension, and tension is the engine of desire. When you ask, you give her control over pacing. She decides what to reveal. She chooses the narrative. She manages the emotional temperature. You become the audience member, applauding at the right moments. But attraction does not grow in interviews. It grows in polarity. Polarity requires friction, and friction requires you to risk being slightly misunderstood. This is where most men collapse, because being misunderstood triggers the old identity wound, the one that says, if they don't get me, I disappear. So you explain, you clarify, you soften, and each clarification trims your edge. If this level of analysis feels uncomfortable, good. It means you recognize the pattern. Most men never look this closely. If you are one of the few who want psychological leverage instead of surface tricks, subscribe. Not for motivation, for structure. Now understand this. The instinct to ask questions rapidly is not about her. It is about your fear of empty space. Silence exposes hierarchy. The one who breaks it first is usually the one who feels it most intensely. When you rush to speak, you signal that you cannot hold uncertainty, and uncertainty is where authority lives. Women, like all humans, test stability unconsciously. They watch how you handle pause, how you respond when they give short answers, how you react when they look away. When you fill every gap immediately, you reveal that you are managing tension, not mastering it. Mastery looks different. Mastery allows a beat longer than comfortable. Mastery makes observations instead of inquiries. Mastery speaks from assumption, not request. Instead of asking what she does for fun, you might say, "You don't seem like someone who wastes time on shallow distractions." Now she must either align with that frame or challenge it. Either way, she is moving toward your structure. You did not seek. You positioned. The psychological shift is subtle but decisive. You move from, "I hope this goes well," to, "Let's see if this aligns." That is not arrogance. That is internal selection. When you operate from selection, your nervous system calms. Because you are no longer trying to win, you are evaluating. And evaluation creates authority. But here is the part most men resist. You cannot fake evaluation if you are internally desperate for validation. Your body will betray you. Your tone will soften at the wrong moments. Your eyes will search for approval, which means the problem is deeper than conversation technique. It is identity dependence. If your sense of worth rises and falls based on female reaction, you will always leak subtle submission through your questions. The solution is not to stop asking questions mechanically. The solution is to remove the need that fuels them. Until you understand that, you will keep repeating the same cycle. Strong start, slow surrender, emotional drain, confusion about why the energy shifted, and you will blame compatibility. It is not compatibility. It is internal posture. In the next phase, we have to dismantle the version of you that believes connection comes from effort, because that version is already losing before the conversation begins. The version of you that relies on effort is dying. You can feel it. The strategies that once worked feel forced now. The jokes land, but they don't move anything. The questions get answered, but they don't build tension. You can keep a conversation alive, but you can't make it matter. That is not bad luck. That is structural failure. The identity you built was designed for acceptance, not for gravity. It was constructed around being liked, not being respected. And those two outcomes rarely coexist for long. When you start removing questions, when you stop chasing responses, when you allow silence to exist, something uncomfortable happens. The old version of you panics. It whispers, "You're losing her." It says, "Say something before it's awkward." It pushes you to recover control through words. But that voice is not wisdom, it is withdrawal. You are withdrawing from your addiction to validation. For years you trained yourself to measure your value by reaction. A smile meant progress, a laugh meant safety, a long answer meant interest. You built an internal reward system around external cues. Now you are cutting the supply, and the body resists. This is where most men return to the old model. They cannot tolerate the uncertainty. They misinterpret silence as failure. They interpret slower pacing as loss of momentum. They think if she is not constantly engaged, they are not succeeding. So they revert. They perform again, and the collapse restarts. But if you hold your ground, if you survive that internal withdrawal, something begins to reorganize. You start to notice that silence does not kill attraction. It reveals structure. You begin to see which women lean forward when you slow down. Which ones fill the space. Which ones become slightly unsettled. You stop trying to impress everyone. You start filtering without announcing it. That shift is dangerous, because now the risk changes. Before, your fear was rejection. Now your risk is rebuilding incorrectly. When a man discards his old identity but lacks structure, he can become rigid instead of grounded, cold instead of calm, distant instead of composed. He mistakes emotional suppression for strength. That is the wrong reconstruction. True composure is not emotional absence. It is emotional containment. When you stop asking questions, you are not becoming silent to punish. You are becoming selective to observe. You are not withholding to manipulate. You are stabilizing to evaluate. There is a difference. In this phase, you will feel alone in conversations, not socially alone, internally alone, because you are no longer clinging to her reactions to orient yourself. You are orienting yourself internally. That solitude is not isolation, it is recalibration. Most men never reach this stage because they never detach from the outcome. They enter interactions with a goal, number, date, approval, validation. And goals create pressure. Pressure creates leakage. Leakage destroys mystery. But when you remove the immediate outcome, the entire interaction shifts. You are no longer chasing a result. You are assessing alignment. You watch how she handles tension. Does she collapse into nervous chatter? Does she try to regain control with rapid questioning? Does she challenge your statements directly? Does she withdraw? Every reaction gives you data. And for the first time, you are not the one being evaluated. You are evaluating. That inversion feels unfamiliar, almost illegal, because you were trained to believe you must earn the right to choose. But here is the deeper layer. If you rebuild yourself around dominance alone, you will attract conflict instead of desire. If you rebuild around silence without warmth, you will project distance instead of depth. The reconstruction must be precise. You are not becoming less expressive. You are becoming less reactive. You are not becoming harder. You are becoming slower. Slowness creates weight. Weight creates presence, and presence forces others to move around you instead of through you. But this stage carries psychological pressure, because once you stop asking, once you stop performing, once you stop seeking reassurance, there is no hiding from your own internal instability. If you feel anxious, you will feel it clearly. If you feel insecure, you will see it. If you crave validation, it will surface. There is no conversational tactic to mask that. This is why most men never become composed. They want techniques, not reconstruction. They want lines, not structural change. They want results without identity recalibration. That path leads back to performance. If you are going through this shift quietly, I want to see it. Comment the city you're watching from, not for engagement, for pattern recognition. Men everywhere are entering this phase alone, thinking they are the only ones dismantling an outdated version of themselves. You are not alone, but you are responsible. The old self that begged subtly through questions cannot survive in this new structure. It will attempt to resurface in moments of tension, when she delays a reply, when she challenges you, when she pulls back slightly. That is where the real test begins. Will you revert to regain comfort, or will you hold the new posture long enough for it to solidify? Because if you rebuild incorrectly, you become either the cold manipulator or the silent coward. If you rebuild correctly, you become the stable axis around which interaction rotates. And the difference between those outcomes is razor thin. This is where the pressure intensifies, because now it is no longer about what to say. It is about who remains when you choose not to speak. Now we remove the final excuse. Up to this point, you may still be holding onto a quiet narrative, a convenient one. It says women today are distracted. It says dating culture is broken. It says attention spans are destroyed. It says you are reacting to a flawed environment. That narrative feels intelligent. It is still victimhood. As long as you believe the problem is external, you will unconsciously wait for better conditions, better women, better timing, better luck. Meanwhile, your posture remains unstable. The truth is harder. The environment does not determine your presence. It only exposes it. If she loses interest quickly, it is not because she has too many options. It is because you revealed too early that you needed to be chosen. If she dominates the rhythm of the interaction, it is not because she is overpowering. It is because you surrendered frame through subtle compliance. This is not blame, it is control. When you take responsibility for the emotional climate you project, you regain leverage. When you blame trends, culture, apps, or personality types, you give your power away. You cannot control her attention. You can control your structure, and structure is discipline. Cognitive control comes first. You must monitor your internal impulses without obeying them. The urge to ask a question out of discomfort, the urge to clarify when misunderstood, the urge to over-explain when she looks unconvinced. Notice the impulse. Do not obey it immediately. That pause is power. Most men act on emotional reflex. They feel tension and try to neutralize it instantly. But tension is not the enemy. Undirected tension is. If you can sit in tension without scrambling, you signal internal stability. Stability creates contrast. Contrast creates intrigue. Behavioral consistency follows. You cannot be grounded one day and reactive the next. If your tone shifts drastically based on her mood, you are still externally governed. If you are confident when she is warm and uncertain when she is distant, you are still dependent. Consistency builds authority. Authority builds safety. Safety builds attraction. But not the safe kind you have been taught. Not comfort through compliance. Safety through solidity. She can disagree with you without feeling you will collapse. She can test you without feeling you will overcorrect. She can go silent without you panicking. That is structure. Emotional containment is the final layer. This does not mean suppression. It means regulation. You can feel interest without leaking it. You can feel attraction without performing it. You can feel uncertainty without exposing panic. Containment makes your emotions heavy instead of scattered. Scattered energy feels boyish. Contained energy feels deliberate. Without this discipline, your reconstruction from the last chapter will decay. You will slide into coldness or passive silence. You will call it composure. She will experience it as disengagement. Do not confuse withdrawal with strength. Strength remains engaged without chasing. There is another uncomfortable truth. Some interactions will fail even when you are structured. Some women will not respond to depth. Some will prefer noise, constant validation, predictable dynamics. You must accept this without bitterness. If you respond with resentment, you reveal entitlement. If you respond with self-doubt, you reveal fragility. The disciplined response is neutral assessment, not aligned. Move on. This is where victimhood tries to return. It whispers, "You did everything right." That sentence is dangerous because you are not trying to perform correctly. You are trying to embody correctly. Embodiment is not about outcome. It is about identity coherence. When your thoughts, posture, pacing, and words align, you stop negotiating mid-conversation. You stop second-guessing after every sentence. You stop replaying interactions at night looking for mistakes, because there was no performance, only presence. Understand this clearly. If you do not build discipline, your silence becomes awkward. Your mystery becomes confusion. Your leadership becomes control. Without structure, collapse turns into decay. You have already dismantled the man who begged subtly through questions. If you fail to replace him with a disciplined framework, you will default back under pressure. And pressure always arrives. She will challenge a statement. She will delay a response. She will test your certainty. Not maliciously, instinctively. In that moment, you either hold frame calmly or you revert to seeking reassurance. There is no middle ground. This is where men separate. Not by charisma, not by looks, by emotional governance. Govern yourself or be governed by reaction. The next step is not about speaking less. It is about becoming someone who does not need to speak to feel significant, and that requires reconstruction with precision. At the beginning, I told you most men lose respect in the first minute, not because they say the wrong thing, but because they reveal need. You have now seen where that need comes from. Ego defense, emotional fatigue, identity fragmentation, subtle victimhood, undisciplined impulses, the reflex to fill silence so you don't feel invisible. The solution was never stop asking questions. The solution is eliminate the man who needs to ask from insecurity. Reconstruction begins with removal. You eliminate compulsive validation seeking. You eliminate the urge to clarify every misunderstanding. You eliminate the habit of over-explaining your intentions. You eliminate the instinct to chase momentum when energy dips. You stop negotiating your worth in real time. Then you build. You build internal orientation. You enter conversations not to extract, but to assess. You build slower pacing. You allow pauses to breathe. You build observational speech instead of interrogative speech. You build statements that carry weight instead of questions that leak dependence. You replace performance with posture. You replace urgency with timing. You replace hunger with selectivity. This does not make you cold, it makes you deliberate. There is a difference between a man who withholds because he is afraid and a man who reveals slowly because he has depth. One is guarded, the other is structured. Depth takes time to access. And when you operate from depth, something changes in the dynamic. You stop trying to win the interaction. You stop trying to impress. You stop trying to secure an outcome before it naturally forms. Instead, you create an environment where silence is not awkward, where eye contact is steady, where your words are measured, where your reactions are controlled, where she feels observed without being interrogated. You become the axis. And here is the paradox. When you stop trying to lead overtly, you begin to lead structurally. When you stop asking to be let in, you become the space she wants to enter. But understand this clearly. This is not manipulation, it is self-governance. You are no longer bending your tone to match hers. You are no longer speeding up because she seems distracted. You are no longer proving that you are interesting. You are present whether she engages or not. That is power. And power without noise is rare. Some women will not know what to do with it. They are used to men who overtalk, overshare, overpursue. Your restraint will unsettle them. Your calm will create tension. Your silence will create curiosity. The right ones will lean in, not because you begged, because you did not. This is where endurance enters. You must endure misinterpretation. You must endure moments where silence feels heavy. You must endure the internal discomfort of not performing. Reconstruction is not instant, it is practiced. You will catch yourself almost asking unnecessary questions. You will feel the old reflex to fill space. You will sense the urge to explain, pause, hold, choose differently. Every time you override the old impulse, you reinforce the new identity. Eventually, you will notice something subtle. Conversations feel lighter, not because you are trying harder, because you are carrying less. You are not dragging anxiety through every exchange. You are not monitoring every micro-expression. You are stable. And stability is attractive because it is scarce. Now return to that first minute, the moment where most men lose respect. In the past, you entered that moment needing something: approval, momentum, direction. Now you enter differently. You observe first, you speak deliberately, you allow silence, you assume relevance instead of seeking it. You are not hoping she finds you interesting. You are evaluating whether she aligns. That is the reversal. That is the preservation of presence. And that is what Machiavelli would understand better than most modern advice ever could. Power is not loud. It is positioned. From this point forward, stop asking yourself what to say to make her stay. Start asking yourself whether you are structured enough that her staying becomes a choice she makes without being pushed. If you are building that version of yourself deliberately, subscribe. Not for entertainment, for refinement. And when you step into your next conversation, do not try to apply lines. Do not try to remember tactics. Just hold the silence longer than your old self could, and watch what changes. because the man who no longer needs to ask is the man who is finally in control, quietly, deliberately, completely.